You're listening to the PwC Thailand Spotlight podcast series, where we make sense of business trends shaping Thailand and beyond. I'm Tidra Aptana, your host for today. In our second episode, we're looking at the major challenges facing the Asia-Pacific region today and asking what businesses should be doing to respond to this new reality. Today, we're delighted to have Sridharan Nair, PwC Asia-Pacific Vice Chairman of Markets, on the show to discuss the business outlook for Asia-Pacific and how CEOs and business leaders can better prepare for the key challenges ahead, as identified in the two latest PwC reports. The Asia-Pacific study of the 26th Annual Global CEO Survey, Leading in the New Reality, and Asia-Pacific's Time Responding to the New Reality. In both reports, a similar theme emerges: a new reality burdened with complexities. Business leaders must tread carefully and strategically by adopting a holistic approach. Sri has more than 3 decades of experience in audit and business advisory services, working with clients across various countries and industries. Moreover, he is a frequent guest speaker at conferences on topics ranging from his areas of expertise to business issues. He'll cast some light on what these challenges and success factors mean for business and how you can respond as a professional. Hello, Sri. It's such a pleasure to have you on our podcast today.
Hi, T. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast series by PwC Thailand. I'm delighted to join you.
Let's start with a question about what businesses are doing as many countries across the Asia-Pacific region are starting to emerge from COVID-19. They're now turning their attention to significant macroeconomic headwinds, such as supply chain disruption, geopolitical conflict, and high inflation. What are we seeing in terms of actions that businesses are deploying against the backdrop of these challenges?
The first point that I would like to emphasize in response to your question is the new reality that businesses face today. We have referenced that in the title to both publications that you mentioned at the start. The business world in the past has had to deal with issues such as inflation, economic slowdown, supply chain disruptions, and to some extent, geopolitical related challenges from economic sanctions. So these are really not new issues. What is different, though, and unprecedented in my view, is that these issues are coming together and occurring all at the same time. So the new reality for a CEO today is thinking simultaneously about what, for example, the US-China relations mean for investments, how supply chains will be affected, what does inflation mean for cost of doing business, and at the same time addressing with more recent considerations such as the hopes and fears of the workforce, while also dealing with increasing pressure for action on ESG, environmental, social, and governance-related issues. So it is against this backdrop that PwC, we conducted our 26th Annual Global CEO Survey late in 2022, and we released the results in January 2023. And we heard from 4,410 CEOs worldwide, including 1,634 from Asia-Pacific. And there were a number of things that Asia-Pacific CEOs told us. Let me just summarize that briefly and give some context before I answer your question directly. One, they are pessimistic about global economic growth. 69% believe global economic growth will decline over the next 12 months versus last year, where 76% felt growth would improve. So you see a complete turnaround there in a 12-month period. Secondly, similar to their global peers, inflation, macroeconomic volatility, and geopolitical conflict are the top 3 risks that Asia-Pacific CEOs say they will focus on in the next 12 months. And thirdly, CEOs have highlighted also the need to transform their business because they believe their current business models will not survive within the next decade. So then coming to your question, T, about what actions businesses are deploying, this is what CEOs have told us. First and foremost, they are prioritizing short-term profitability. Their focus is really on the here and now, preserving the operating profitability and immediate cash flow generation. Secondly, what they have indicated is that they intend to grow out of the crisis in the short term. And how do they intend to do so? By reducing operating costs, raising prices, and diversifying their portfolio. Interestingly, most do not plan to reduce their workforce, but that's not really surprising given the talent shortage that we face in the region. As geopolitical risks rise, Asia Pacific CEOs essentially have said that they are planning to respond accordingly. They will adjust their presence in the current market or expand to new markets. They will adjust supply chains and they will diversify their offering, essentially to drive short term profitability. And this is actually slightly different. I think global CEOs have indicated that they will prioritize and take actions pertaining to cybersecurity and data privacy to manage digital risk. Those do not feature as high risk as far as the Asia Pacific CEOs are concerned. And the final point I'll make in relation to your question is how does this all relate to the context in Thailand, where you have seen a rebound in the private consumption and tourism picking up post the opening of our borders? Now, if you're a CEO in the SME sector, which continues to be an underwriter of growth for Thailand, CEOs in this sector could benefit from reorienting where profitable their supply chains, their workforce, their products and services, just to leverage on the breadth and depth of the SME economy and capture their share of the growth. On the other hand, if you're a CEO of a large company, and large companies continue to be the mainstay of the economy in Thailand, I think they contribute about 60+% of the manufacturing GDP and 52% of total services. So if you're a CEO in this sector, then one could say that the focus should be on growth plans that are aligned to supporting government policy in sort of defined next generation industries, things like biofuels, sectors enabled by the digital economy or medical related devices. So you'll see basically that specific actions that CEOs have indicated that they will take to manage profitability in the short term.
From your responses, the action businesses are taking is more focused on the short term to weather through this new reality we're facing. The challenges you noted have a direct impact on CEOs' level of optimism and pessimism. More than half of CEOs surveyed believe their current business models will no longer be viable in 10 years' time unless they transform at a faster pace. What are business leaders doing to balance, in this case, short-term profitability and long-term transformation?
This is one of the distinct findings from our CEO survey. The point you just made was, I would say, the highlights of our CEO survey, that 53% of Asia Pacific CEOs believe their companies will not be economically viable in the next decade if they continue on their current path. And this is, in fact, 14% higher than what global CEOs have said. So it's really a major concern as far as Asia Pacific CEOs are concerned. And it's quite staggering if you think about those statistics. And this urgency, in fact, is even stronger in countries like South Korea, Japan, and China, where about 3/4 of the CEOs have said that their businesses will need to be transformed and reinvented for the future. So to your first question, I talked about prioritizing short-term profitability, but at the same time, here, Asia Pacific CEOs are recognizing the need to reinvent their business so that they can remain relevant in today's landscape. And this is what we have called the dual imperative in our report, balancing the execution of short-term profitability and long-term transformation. While a handful of the larger companies in the Asia Pacific region have been looking at the transformation agenda, most have still been focused on the short-term recovery post the pandemic and are only now beginning to think about longer-term reinvention of their business. So early days for many, many companies, bar a few exceptions with the larger ones. It's not surprising if you think about that, because sort of executing this dual imperative, it's a fairly complex undertaking, right? On the one hand, you need to focus on short-term efficiency. On the other hand, you need to accelerate innovation. So where do you strike the right balance between the two? In our report, what we have done is we've highlighted 5 actions that we feel CEOs of businesses need to take to address the dual imperative. So let me just go through those 5 points. Firstly, we have said that CEOs need to expand the scale and the scope of insights available to their C-suite, really to get a better understanding of the forces that are shaping the business environment. For example, understanding the themes around sector-specific drivers of volatility, or looking at geopolitical sensitivities to supply chain, or looking at how do climate and cyber risks impact customer preferences. So really broadening those insights just to make sure that we understand the full landscape and don't look at these matters in isolation. The second thing to do is really mobilizing and empowering the executive leadership to take action and make decisions that support the business's long-term strategic goals. So what we're saying is the CEO and the C-suite will need to leverage the real-time insights that they have gleaned, and they need to be empowered to make tactical decisions in an agile and quick manner. It could be around products, it could be around services, it could be around processes. Use those insights, empower people, and make those decisions quickly. We also feel that businesses need to take a disciplined approach that's focused on capabilities to balance profitability, transformation, and growth. What this means is really looking at a company's capabilities and strengths. What are the real drivers of growth, and deciding where and how to prioritize our investment today. For example, it's diversification of product and supply chains, where not to cut costs or limit capacity, which could put transformation at risk. So take a considered and disciplined approach to looking at where is it that you can get your greatest growth, leveraging on the existing strengths. The next point is around leadership. We think that leadership approach needs to be adapted to address the concerns and aspirations of employees. And CEOs really listening to what we are hearing from what employees across the region have said. They need to foster empowerment, inclusion, and trust, including leveraging the benefits of things like hybrid work. And last but not least, embracing a collective mindset. And what we mean by that is really seeking out alliances to achieve your desired outcomes. You cannot go it alone and expect to achieve all these things without leveraging on other parties that you could work with. So CEOs in Asia Pacific need to broaden the scope of alliances to include whether it's technical or financial or talent and technology, and link these to the capabilities. So in summary, broaden the insights, mobilize and act in a sort of agile manner, take a disciplined approach to looking at where your capabilities lie and what you need to do, adapt your leadership to make sure people feel empowered and included, and look at working with alliances and other collaborations that could further your company's own agenda.
According to the survey, ESG remains the top agenda for Asia Pacific CEOs for the longer term. However, we must act now as we are still far behind what is needed to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the global average temperature threshold we should exceed. What can businesses do now? How can applying ESG help businesses differentiate themselves in the market?
Well, interestingly, from the survey, ESG-related risks remain a focus for the longer term and did not appear to be in the radar of immediate priorities. So against the current backdrop, I think CEOs are facing an ESG dilemma. Clearly, there's a consensus that's emerged in recent years that ESG issues are crucially important for the corporate world. ESG has increasingly become a source of premium with a range of stakeholders, right? Especially employees who look for a sense of purpose at work. However, investors don't appear to be ready to accept lower returns in order to further ESG goals. And according to our own survey, this is PwC's Global Investor Survey 2022, 81% said that they would accept only a 1 percentage point or smaller reduction in returns to advance ESG objectives. And in fact, around half of that group would not accept any decline in returns at all. So there's quite a dilemma here that CEOs actually face. Now, our own work in ESG, and as you know, this is a priority area for us globally and in the region as well in Asia Pacific. Our work in ESG strategy development suggests that businesses can actually perform well for investors and pursue a clear ESG strategy at the same time if they find the right balance between short-term performance requirements and the investments needed to meet longer-term ESG goals. So the key is really to define a long-term ESG path to create value, but working at the same time within the boundaries of the short-term KPIs that address investors' performance expectations. I think at the same time, there's also a need to take stakeholders, in particular shareholders, along the journey toward that longer-term vision, which should help address the disconnect between short-term pressures and longer-term opportunities. Now, it is difficult because getting the ESG stance right will require fairly deep and systematic change throughout the business and the environment that business operates in. And as I mentioned earlier, business cannot do this alone. They must consider which ecosystems they should be part of. And by building, joining, or creating an ecosystem, they don't have to provide and scale all the capabilities for ESG on their own. And linking this to their own capabilities also means business must expand the traditional breadth and depth of the potential partners beyond financial and technology across the entire value chain. And this could be innovation, supply chain, insights and analytics. It could be front office matters, etc. So the whole sphere of things that they could look at. I think the other point I would make, T, is if you take it in the context of the market in Thailand and what our ESG teams have actually told us, there have been a number of developments on the regulatory front in Thailand in more recent times. The Thai government has taken steps to sort of enhance the regulatory framework, focused primarily on climate. There's upcoming taxonomy regulations, there's climate change and biodiversity legislation, and there's a potential carbon tax as well. So a number of things that are happening on that front. If you take a sector-specific focus, you look at the Thai Bankers Association, they have launched an ESG declaration supported by the central bank that sets out clear commitments around products, governance, risk management, and strategy. So as a result of this, banks in Thailand are increasingly embedding ESG into their strategies, and in particular, their sustainability portfolios as well. The ESG ecosystem in Thailand that is evolving. The SEC is leading the creation of an ecosystem, I understand, connecting various players, like the fundraisers, the investors, etc., etc. So what that means for CEOs in Thailand, which require funding for climate transformation, they could benefit from a parallel focus in seeking private financing while partnering with other players, data, climate ecosystem players, to augment their own reporting capability. So these are a number of things that CEOs in Thailand, for example, could consider.
You've shared the directions on how businesses can apply ESG to differentiate themselves by integrating it as part of their strategy, along with a whole network of stakeholders who must get involved to make meaningful differences. What does that practice look like, having it embedded in the company strategy? What are a couple of good examples you can share with us?
Well, Dee, when I thought about this, I thought it'll be good to start with what we are doing in PwC as a global firm as well, right? Our own net zero journey in PwC. And I think PwC, we have said that we believe the business community has a key role to make that happen. And we're committed to leading by example. And I think we can be proud of some of the targets we have set and the path that we are taking. So in 2020, PwC, we announced our global science-based commitment to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. We have committed to sort of decarbonize the way we operate and decouple our business growth from our emissions as well. We've also committed to the United Nations Race to Zero campaign and business ambition for 1.5 degrees, which brings business together to accelerate action to decarbonize the economy. We're clearly helping our clients and working with suppliers to tackle the climate impact. We've made considerable investments in getting ESG specialists to work with our clients to address this important business issue. We also continue to offset our emissions through high quality carbon credits, really to reduce our climate impact immediately. And last but not least, the global strategy that we released last year, the new equation, that commits us to also increase transparency and help to develop a robust ESG reporting framework and ESG standards as well. So a number of things that I think PwC have said we will do that I would put as leading practice. A long way still to go in the journey in terms of executing all of this. A great example, we don't need to look very far away. We should look at what we are doing internally as well. As far as external examples are concerned, I think there are examples out there. One that I would call out is a group in Thailand, the CP Group, that's considered a global leader in annual S&P sustainability rankings. And what the group has done is basically integrated the core principles of the Sustainable Development Goals under the UN through its entire value chain. The group is basically used its conglomerate footprint and its capabilities to deliver community benefits through upskilling, through scholarships, looking at food access, waste and water withdrawal, and looking at overall emissions reductions as well. So a great example in Thailand as well with the CP Group. Beyond that, if you look at the region, Toyota has gone well beyond cars and energy. They have extended into circularity and biodiversity by focusing on water, input materials, waste, and wildlife impact throughout the entire value chain. So you do see a number of leading practices and some of these larger companies taking action in a very considered way, looking at the entire supply chain. A couple of great examples with Standard Chartered and Capital Land as well. I think the majority of companies, lots of work still to do in the years ahead.
Well, those were all great examples for us to understand how ESG is embedded and executed by different companies, including within our own firm as well. Well, thank you so much, Sri, for your time today. We got a lot of insight on what to expect in the next few years for businesses to move ahead and weather through this challenge of the new reality.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and I enjoyed it.
As mentioned, these factors are interconnected and mutually reinforcing, so business leaders must take them all into account to drive growth across the region. For more information, you can check out the Asia Pacific study of the 26th Annual Global CEO Survey and Asia Pacific's time responding to the new reality on our website. Both reports are available in English and Thai. There'll also be continued coverage of these success factors in the next few months, so be sure to check out our social media accounts, including LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, to stay up to date. Stay tuned for the next episode of the PwC Thailand Spotlight podcast.